precise and went to maybe specific symbolic events or whatever that actually brought you to the point that you could do what you've done?
Well, I don't think it's a matter of special courage in the first place. Women I was in jail with, I thought, were tremendously courageous, faced, far more difficult situations than I did. So, and I see people in ordinary life. A friend of mine called me last night who is a child with Down syndrome, and I think that takes a certain kind of courage. She said, you make the decision, how you accept that kind of thing. You can either make a positive experience of that, or you can not. And I think that's the point, is making a decision. And in my case, I don't think it was particularly courageous. It was just more a case of looking at the realities. And, I'm very scared of nuclear war. I'm very scared of what it'll do to my kids. I'm very scared of what it'll do to me and the rest of the world. I really like this planet. And I think what most people do is kind of a psychic numbing kind of process. And whether looking at this takes a certain courage, I don't know. I don't think it is even that. I think it's just much more freeing and much more livable to look at this thing and deal with it than to hide it under layers of consciousness. And I think I'm just grateful that I've been given the opportunity to both get that kind of information and then meet the kind of people like Phil who showed me what it meant to deal with it in a positive, creative way and not simply, walk around in some kind of fog of despair.
Mom, I read last night a piece that you had written shortly after goodness, it would have been by the time the preliminary hearing, or shortly after the arrest. At any rate, you were drawing an analogy between your feelings about the death of your mother and how your own family, might view you if you went to prison. Could you talk about that?
Oh, yeah, that was a couple weeks after I was in jail, I think. Probably when I hit the low point, I began to see myself as having made a choice which, in one sense, might be looked upon as an equivalent choice of suicide. I was walling myself off in a jail cell, away from my children where I really wanted to be, with them, and wondering, what that would mean to them, and imagining them growing up and starting to shave and, going through a whole period of years without me and concerned about their knowledge that it had been a choice I had made rather than, if I had gotten cancer and knew I had to die or was, contemplating suicide or something that could be looked at as death dealing. And although I saw my choice, I never have not seen my choice as a choice for life. I knew that what it meant was a kind of situation where I would be walled off, sealed off in a way from my kids that would separate me from their growing up experience. And I knew I had to take that feeling that I had and find a way to deal with that because that was very real. And deal with that in the context of what I had done and why I had done it. And it took some time, a period of probably a month after that in jail, before I could take what I'd written on that day, 2 weeks after arrest, and put it into an article that explained why I would put myself into such a situation. And I think what it came down to was a pair of hard choices. And the hardest choice being to go home, look at my kids, and say, hey, I know nuclear war is coming, and not do what I could do to stop it. And I just decided that was the hardest choice to make. And that separation, as scary as that was to me, and as bad as it may be on my kids, was not as bad a choice as seeing them die of nuclear war, or seeing them get to a situation where, they would look at me and say, what did you do? Why didn't you try to stop this?
Did you discuss your feelings with them?
Sure. Over and over again. I talked for months with my kids, well, for really the last couple of years, about the possibility of my doing something that might put me in jail and what that might mean. And I think it was sort of a certain unreality to that, because it was at that point kind of speculative, and neither I nor they knew what that would entail or what it would be like. But I did what I could to prepare them and to make them understand.
Do you think they do?
Boy, that's hard to say. I hope they have some sense of it. I'm very, very happy the two boys are here and got inside the courtroom. Got to hear Dan's fine, marvelous statement in the courtroom. I feel really that, if anything, what I want to teach them, and it's sort of aside from going to jail and not going to jail, is to live fully and live out conscientiously what you believe, and that's a very freeing experience and a very good experience. And if they can catch a little bit of that from me and understand that a little bit, whether they understand the nuclear war questions or the political issues, that's the bottom line for me.
Molly, you said that you felt obligated to do what you could to stop nuclear war, and I know that one of the things that's been said often by your supporters as well as your critics is, why did you think that an action like this would stop nuclear war?
I didn't know if it would.
Can you explain that? I think that's interesting.
Well, I think what it came down to finally was stopping the calculation and the pragmatism and the practicality questions that everybody sort of goes through. Well, if I knew that this would stop war, sure, I'd go to jail too, that kind of thing. If I knew this was going to be an effective action, well, sure, but, what you're doing may be just blowing in the wind and wasting everybody's, time, and it may be useless and we'll all die anyhow. And I had to get beyond that question and come to just deciding what was the truthful choice for me, what was the real way to live out the faith that I have, that there is a God, and he's a more powerful, she, I think I would say she, is a more powerful God than the power of these weapons in which so many people place their trust. And that further, I think despair is the disease of the age, and that many, many people experience that. And I wanted to get beyond the despair and come up with a basis for hope. And hope isn't, looking at things and seeing things optimistically. Isn't that? That's being optimistic. Hope is looking at an abyss and, just refusing to step into it.
Well, do you have a kind of apocalyptic vision in terms of, it seemed to, in terms of the dynamics
of the arms race? I think it's going to be very, very difficult to turn aside. I think we're at a very, very late period in the process of trying to change it. There may be some hope in that if people do see the absolute seriousness of it, we might be able to make some historical changes, such as was made at the time of abolition with slavery, where finally war begins to be seen as something that's absolutely useless and does not have to be, and is an institution that can be gotten beyond historically. I think there's a possibility of that if people really come to see the absolute uselessness of war. And I think it's possible we could reach that. But I don't have any, great optimism about people changing that quickly.